Okay, the recording started, so we'll get started. So we're really getting near the final here, and we're into topic 12, and we're going to talk about a few things, especially corporate social responsibility and going global, because going global right now, is really moving quickly, and it's really going up. A logarithmic path. It's not a straight line. So you're seeing more and more operations going global in today's world, and it's supported by economics because it's all about comparative advantage, and everybody wins. Now there's a few people that don't, and that's where they're worried about maybe developing nations getting taken advantage of, or some workers being taken advantage of, but the thing is that, we got to get beyond that, and that's why you're here, you're leaders, and it's all about triple bottom line, to make sure that we do the right things socially, the right things environmentally, and then, prosper. It's about profit, planet, and people, and so that's where we're going to take it. So I'll get started, but I just want to talk about, what's coming up, and we'll go from here. So test number 3. So just everyone, I'm just reminding you again that test number 3 is scheduled as a remote test, and is to be held April 17th at 7 p.m. And this is the only date and time for test number 3 that it's scheduled, and we're right close to having to bring the marks in. So if there's you'll have to have a real substantiated reason for not making that particular appointment. And again, be very, it's very important to know that you need to be prepared to have your lockdown browser downloaded and verified, and your webcam is working prior to test number 3, to make sure that you're unencumbered, and you're worrying about doing a really good job on the test rather than technology. And you access test number 3 under topic 13 from Blackboard. And again, I'll be standby online, and just an email away if you have any kind of issues, and I'll be helping you along there. Test number 3 will be 50 multiple choice questions, true and false questions in there, but a total of 50 questions covering topics 9, 10, 11, and 12. All right. And again, the best way to study is to start with the commentary presentations that are stored under weekly commentary in Blackboard. And again, be mindful of what's highlighted in yellow, and especially what's highlighted in yellow, and then you see some bolding going on, or there's some gold keys that really kind of highlight some key areas that you should be going into, and into the materials in those topics of 9, 10, 11, and 12 to study and know more detail about, because context is all about helping you answer these questions. There's no such thing as a trick question. It's just understanding the context of the question, and you do that by studying and pick up associated information to make the question make sense and answer it properly. Okay, so I did put some information on here about the lockdown browsers, and especially if one or two of you have Google Chromebooks or Chromebooks, there's just a few more things that you need to go through to make sure that you can make yourself available to the test. And again, there's more information on Blackboard in the navigation panel. I think it says 2023 lockdown browser, and has all this information. That here's some of it that I'm showing you right now. Okay, so let's talk about what's coming up. So you have an individual project submission. So each one of you has to prepare this. There's 4 main questions that you have to answer. It's 10% of your marks. And again, I'm going to get into help me help you, and structure and answering these questions in a very organized way will allow me to navigate that paper and go through and mark it better, basically. So that's what I'm asking you to do. And then the team project that you're going to do with your team members, your regular team members that you've been doing other assignments with, and the participation activities as a group, is worth 20% of your mark. So let's just talk about the organization for the individual project. So you can see with the 4 questions, like here's the first one. So the heading would be 1.0 communication. And the subheading is the actual question, the main question: what are the characteristics of effective communication relevant to your team project submission? I want to see that on your paper, and then I can follow it. And then underneath that, there'll be the subheading of 1.2, relate to the theory, and then provide a minimum of 4 examples. And then another subheading, assess your communication characteristics of scale. And then the other subheading, explain why you gave yourself that score and provide examples. Now, this assess your communication characteristics, the scale is there on the questionnaire, and you answer that. And then, if you have several examples, number them out. Example 1.4.1, example 2 would be 1.4.2. And if you follow this organizational piece, I'll be able to really kind of get a sense of, yes, you've done your due diligence. I see, what you've answered, and I'll be able to mark it appropriately. So I really appreciate your collaboration on that one. Okay, in terms of the team project, again, you don't have to answer all 30 questions. And, back last term, I still had, I think, 5 or 6 groups that answered all 30 questions. And if you do that, I'm going to look at the first amount of questions that make up a total of 100 marks or just a little bit more. And I'm not going to look at the other ones. So all that work that you've done in those extra questions is for naught. And here I've given you some scenarios. So if you just answered the first 10 questions of that 30 question mark, right? You look at the marks that are assigned for each question, and that totals up to 102. So if you did the first 10 questions, I would mark your assignment under, on 102 marks as total, and then give you a grade based on that. But you can see here in example 2, a group could answer maybe the first 5 questions, and then answer other questions that they're more able to answer, and that totals up, roughly 104 marks. So I would mark that paper out of 104 marks, and so on and so forth. So example 3, you can see that would total up about 106. I don't think you can go over that based on the choices that you're making, but then I would mark this particular example out of 106 marks. So again, please help me help you. Help me efficiently and effectively navigate your submission. So again, put the answer title in to each answer that you're going to answer, and then break it down in terms of elements of the organizational structure for answer number 1. 1B would be the Amazon structure, and then 1C would be the reasons why you've made your assertions. All right, so I'm hoping that will be the guide. It'll make it a lot easier for you to organize your paper, a lot easier for me to give you a better mark. Okay, any questions about that? Any questions about that at all? You can either chat them, or you can just unmute and ask me a question. Okay, we're all good. Can I see some thumbs up? Okay, good, thank you. All right, okay, so in topic 12, you have 2 more surveys to complete. And again, if you look at their subject matter, ethical leadership behavior and ethical employee behavior, you can see there's about 2 questions in the Amazon 30 question piece that you can select, so you're doing work for yourself in terms of getting your wording together to answer those questions. So that will be assistant. So now let's talk about the 2 participation activities. They're both group participation activities, 12A and 12B. So we started with Tim Hortons, and we've done a PESTLE analysis, we've done a SWOT analysis, we've done the ideal customer for Tim Hortons. We've done the SIPOC and the VRIO pieces. So you have all the sort of the content of understanding, how can you create a global strategy for Tim Hortons. So this assignment just gets you right to the crux of the strategy. So you're to come up with a minimum of 5 strategic goals that that are specifically related to Tim Hortons, not some generic type of goals that you can just pick off, the internet, and validate each goal with a few sentences to make up no more than 1 page of submission. And then that would represent the actual strategy, because goals are really chunks of strategy that come together so that the organization can work at one piece at a time, kind of thing. Now the drawing underneath gives you an idea of the scope of what the strategy could be. So you could pick up goals in any one of these categories. And what I'd also recommend is possibly do a ChatGPT search on understanding what maybe Starbucks international strategy was, and that might give you some insight as to what would be relevant for Tim Hortons. Okay, so you could go from there. So again, I'm looking at a minimum of 5 strategic goals, and here you go. So here's some information on what a strategic goal statement looks like, and it's clear and it's compelling, and it starts. You go from X to Y, from one point to another, and that's the gap that you're identifying. By when? I mean, that's what it is. So what are you going to do by when? And it's again, it's there. That statement is there for all the stakeholders, especially the employees. And the thing is, the employees benefit from a clear line of sight as to what they do. And I go back to this statistic that I've shared with you earlier, is that in North America, only 9% of employees actually realize what they're doing in their job and how that connects, line of sight to the strategy of the organization. And so that you really need to write these goals so that everybody could understand them, and then understand how they're contributing, from a shared vision point of view, to achieve these goals. And those goals need to be clear in what they're doing to unify your team, your leadership. And it's no secret either that high performance teams, one of the key characteristics about those teams is that they have clear, distinct goals set for that team. And that's why they're able to align, their resources and their capabilities and their skills and their mindset to be able to achieve those goals. So here's an example, in the bottom here, to kind of give you a sense of how to write up those goals. So that would be, 12A. So let's talk about 12B. 12B is basically looking at taking those goals and ranking them. And that's what it is. A strategic plan, again, is as much as what you're not going to do as what you are going to do. So that's why you rank things, because there's scarce resources and you want to deal with the top issues, the top goals in going forward. So what I'd like you to do then is to go through, the small ranking on these 3 categories, and then total that number up. And you can see, let me just get back to when you did the PESTEL and you used that framework that I gave you, you really characterized the impact of what that particular issue was in the PESTEL category. And the thing is that it really forces you to do critical thinking when you start understanding the timeline and the impact and the characteristics of that trend or that piece. And that's why I want you to go through this. And what you'll do is you'll put down your top goal and score this from 1 to 5. So if it's very serious, say it would be a 1. If it's very urgent, that like you need to get this done in less than 2 years or whatever, say that would be a 1 again. And then if that problem is growing or that opportunity is growing, that you need to jump on it right away, well that would be a 1 as well. And the issue or the goal with the smallest score then would rise to the top as a top priority. Okay, you'd add 1 plus 1 plus 1 would be 3, and that would be 3 out of 15. And something that wasn't serious and didn't need to get done, well, it would have a high, a higher score, and that would rank lower in the rankings. So that's what I'd like you to do on 12B. Okay, so now we're going to start talking about going global, and there's this mantra out there, and it's think global, act local, and that's it's basically a trade-off between, when you're thinking global, you're looking at, economies of scale and standardization and trying to get the most out of you can, most out of your offerings, versus think local is responsiveness. You have to respond to the local market in many of those cases. And so let's say, let's take a look at Apple's iPhone. Well, everybody understands, Apple's iPhone. And really you can focus a lot on the global side, on the international side, because everyone will lean towards what they have to do to use and purchase an iPhone. But if you're trying to sell healthcare on a global scale, well, there's not one size that fits all. So you have to be more responsive, and you have to work with the culture of that community or that country. You need to work with the regulations around healthcare. There's a lot more regulations in those things. So again, think local, being more responsiveness or being more responsive is more important at this point in time. So that's what kind of gives you that perspective of where you should be when you take a look at your offering, when you take a look at the market, when you take a look at the industry that you're working in, when you take a look at the culture of the nation and everything else. So this has a big bearing. I think that's the overriding portion of looking at going global. But why do organizations go global? Well, there's a lot of proactive reasons, and then there's a lot just reactive reasons. So let me start with the reactive reasons. Just plain competitive pressure, and let's say so what it is that there are some global providers out there that are better researched, they're better resourced, they're better in terms of pricing and strategy. So what you have to do is you have to up your game, and how do you up your game in a lot of ways is to go global and find out what they're doing, and working in their territories to understand what their advantages are and how you could maybe take advantage of some of those key resources or capabilities that they're sourcing, in their own pieces. Another reactive reason is that you have all this capacity and you're not producing, up to capacity. So maybe you're at 60% capacity in your production area. What does that mean? You've got a lot of fixed costs just sitting there, and it's not, you're not absorbing that through, that makes your unit cost very large. So if you can go global, well, then you can export, enough to be able to go to full capacity, and then use that up and get your unit costs down and get more competitive, or just declining domestic sales, and that kind of comes together with saturated home market, because what happens sometimes, you've got this great product like a gadget, and it's so great, it's gone viral in your own location, and everybody's got it. So what does that mean then? Your domestic sales are declining because you've fully saturated that market. So how to grow? Well, you look globally, and there's other parts of the world that don't have this offering, and you could sell it to them. So that's another reactive reason. Or just under attack from foreign rivals, and that kind of wakes people up. And you don't have to go too far. You just go down to the grocery store down in Red Deer and go down the aisles and just take a look at all the competing products that are there, that are competing with local produced products, and that in itself, with that competition, it forces the local provider to really understand, how they're how they're producing and how competitive they are, and it forces them to go global again, to be able to get economies of scale, to be able to source foreign technology, to be able to source key advantages. So that's where all that comes from. From a proactive reason, well, and maybe there's a factor cost difference across countries. So it might be that gadget A can be produced just at low cost and top quality in your particular country, and because you have the resources there and you have the support industries, and they don't have that in other countries. So you have the leg up, which means that you can go out and grow your market globally, or you have this unique product that is unmatchable in other parts of the world, and the other parts of the world want it. That's a proactive reason to go global. Or you have a technological advantage, or you do have these, the way that you've structured your organization and your production, you do have these economies of scale, and you say, hey, well, we've got these capabilities to be competitive on a sustainable basis, and so why not go out and sell our product globally? And then growing foreign markets, we know that developing countries are getting bigger, and they have more buying power, so that the markets are growing, and you could tap into those markets to sell your offerings, and also sometimes you have exclusive information, and that gives you that competitive advantage where you could be more competitive, globally as well, and grow your business. And again, I talked about rivals attacking you on your own home turf, and going global not only allows you to grow your business, but it also allows you to source maybe key raw materials or key parts that you need to assemble that can be produced on a more comparative advantage basis that you could take in and assemble and then pay out. So it gives you access to technologies that aren't available in your part of the world, or capabilities that aren't available in your part of the world. So that will bring that together and allow you to be that much stronger by going global. All right. So someone who or some organization that decides that they want to export, they'll create a point of service in another country, and that's used for exporting. But hey, people are there now, can source key components or whatever in that territory, and then allow you to import those things. So it has a lot of advantages, to grow your business. So why globalize? So here's the summary. So you expand your global market share, and you can restructure your value chain on a global scale, which means that you can find other provider links of that value chain that you can utilize to better advantage than trying to do it all by yourself, or it's your ultimate goal to globalize. And there's a term called born global. I mean, there's products that come out today, especially digital products, that are just right to go global, and you don't have to do very much to to capture market, because it's so unique or it's so advanced. And then others is you have this excess domestic production capacity that you can now utilize to go global and drop your unit costs and be more profitable, and provide you with greater competitive advantage. So there are a lot of reasons. And so what changes the global companies have to face? Well, the market size, the complexity of foreign markets, the different types of buyers that you may not have been accustomed to, new entrants that are coming in to the global market that will compete with you, and then the actual rivalry. And so we talked about Michael Porter and the five forces model. Well, I'm going to talk to you about the diamond model that he's created, and basically what it is, it's sort of a five forces model that is relevant now to global marketing, and there's a lot of similar components to it, and we're going to go through that. But again, you need to worry about the rivalry right in a particular new foreign country that you're going to go into, and those kind of things. So we'll get to that in the next few slides. So basically, just as a summary with this illustration, decision to go global. Well, you find ways to export. An export basically is producing a product or service, in your local area, and then going foreign to sell that, right? So that's an export. You have to do industry analysis, just like you do in your own country, but you need to take a look at that to make sure that you have the right components to be able to be successful in that industry. You certainly need to do a company assessment to see if you've got the bench strength to be able to go global. You need to understand all the marketing issues, and really importantly, you need to understand the legal and the political situation in those target countries that you want to go into, because they're different, different sets of rules, different regulation, different types of laws in terms of maybe common law, versus civil law, or versus what's in an autocracy, and then understanding currency exchange. And currency exchange is coupled up with maybe high levels of inflation, in a distant country. And if it has high inflation, the currency is going to impact currency, and you could devalue what you have. So you got to be really careful. And a lot of companies will hedge against currency, and to make sure that they're protected, so that they can stay fluid, right? And again, the different sources of financing, and what's happened over the last, say 30 years, is that at one time it was just these global banks that captured the market, and you needed to work with those global banks to get financing. In today's world, there's so many opportunities to find financing like you couldn't before, and so that it allows organizations to go global much more easily, to get the finances they need to either do foreign direct investment, or just pony up to improve their local organization to be able to do say export for a reason. So those are a lot of the key things around that. So let's look at the key management decisions and considerations. So you need an organization for the global project. You need to understand that. Excuse me, I'll just take a little drink here. So it starts with selecting the best market to enter, and we're gonna talk a little more about that, because there's a progression to do that, and I'll talk about that. And then the level of involvement. How much involved are you going to be in a foreign target? How are you going to get paid? In Canada, for exporters, the Business Development Bank of Canada, helps exporters to be able to set up arrangements and kind of ensure that they're going to get paid, so that there's different mechanisms that you could use to get paid and make sure that you do get paid. And then just global etiquette and travel, in terms of understanding the cultural aspects of being in another territory, and understanding how that affects business, and how how important it is to say the right things and do the right things, and then have an export plan. I mean, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. It's that simple. You really need an export plan, because there's so many variables that you need to be tracking, and that plan will bring this together. And it needs to be, a live plan, a workable plan, where you're continually testing your assumptions, where you're continually scanning, trends and conditions in the market from an external scan, and continually looking at your capabilities to make sure that you're relevant, that you need to, so that you can be competitive in those areas. Okay, so now we're getting into a little bit of yellow highlight, and you need to understand, the terminology of organizations, in this global strategy. So if you're a global competitor, well, you view the world as a single market. Your operations are controlled centrally, from the corporate office. But if you're a transnational organization, well, you've got specialized facilities, and that permits, I talked about this global standards versus responsiveness. It allows you to be responsive, for what you're doing in that. And you can, as a transnational, you could have various parts of like organizations that support, the value chain links in your value chain based on the advantages they can get where they are globally. And that's a lot of the, the key strategy around transnational companies. And then multinational, several subsidiaries operating as standalone businesses units in multiple countries. And so that's still, with a multinational, you do have, centralized in your home country, and then you work with those subsidiaries that you have to be able to bring this all together and carry out global offerings. And you notice that there's a little bit of a yellow arrow here, so that you really want to look into the topic information around what a multinational is and those kind of things. And then international, it uses existing capabilities to expand into foreign markets. And you can see Apple in this one, all right? Because Apple, they keep to the marketing and the advertising and the design and they hold that tight. And then they have a company called Foxconn out of China, and now they're starting to build tentacles into India that do the manufacturing and the logistics and that piece, and that gets them through, across the globe to sell their products. Okay, so how do you go global? And it's in sometimes it comes down to having a minimal global investment and then to a range of where you have significant global investment. And there's strategic reasons to be somewhere along this range, because if you're gonna put significant global investment into one or two areas, well then your capabilities to expand globally to take advantage of all the synergies starts to lower. So you'll see that some organizations will manage their investment in certain areas of the globe so they can have the right combinations to extract the synergy of all those bodies to be able to produce global offerings of great competitive advantage. So you can see here as a minimum global investment, global sourcing. So that might be a company, say in Canada, that that will source maybe, let's say, lithium, because lithium is pretty, it's pretty much of a scarce commodity. And what they'll do then is they'll just go out to their battery manufacturer and they'll go global sourcing to find lithium, say in Africa. All right, so that's minimal global investment because it's just enough to put purchasing group together and to go out and do up contracts. And then as you start working more towards significant global investment, well, then you're into exporting and importing, and that's a good entry point, especially as exporting to get to when you're into significant global investment, you're into foreign direct investment, and that's getting on your way to more foreign direct investment. And then licensing again is a way of getting your product out there where you're selling your capabilities or enabling other agents in other countries to use your technology, and you're getting a royalty based on that licensing. And then we all know what franchising is. Franchising not only license the brand, but they will sell certain capabilities in terms of, like McDonald's, on how they put their production piece together. All that is part of the package for a franchisee. And then to the point now where you get into strategic alliances or joint ventures or foreign subsidiaries, that's where you're starting to invest. You're doing more foreign direct investment in those international target areas. And as you invest more, you're taking on more risk. As you invest less, well, then you're not getting as much control on what you want to do from a strategic planning point of view, and a growth, strategic plan to grow point of view. So that's where some of the trade-offs comes in. Okay, so So here is, it's sort of, you know, you walk before you run. And so normally what happens is you start in a domestic market, you know your territory, you know the government, you know the business rules, you're established, you have suppliers, and what you do is you get that right, you know, where you have this offering, and you're very capable in supporting that offering, and you understand, you know, the intricacies of that product, and so now you're ready to start looking at going global. So what do? You do a pre-export stage. And what does that mean? Well, sometimes you may find an agent right in your own country, and that agent will buy those products from your organization, and then have channels, you know, into different target markets internationally, and they take care of that all. So basically, you're just dealing, you know, with one entity in your own country, where you're familiar with the laws, you're familiar with the regulations, and that makes it easy for you to kind of get started. So then the thing is that you start understanding the business that you're supporting there with that agent, and you say, well, you know what, maybe what I can do is that I will take on a little bit more of a role, and what I would do then is I would maybe find an actual agent in that target country, and work with that, and maybe cut back some of the commissions that I would have you know, provided to you know, that agent that's right in my country, and then that's working, and you understand now how that market is growing, and you feel confident about that. So then you might say, well, you know what, let's invest and put a warehouse in that particular foreign market. You know, so now you're starting to, you know, invest in that foreign market, and now you're you know, undergoing a little bit more risk, but you know, you get that, and then you say, wow, okay, so this is working well, I understand this, you know, we're selling quite well, we've established our channels, you know, now maybe it's time to build an actual manufacturing plant, you know, and that's where you're getting into, you know, active involvement, and then, you know, you finally get that plant, and you bring in employees, and you establish, you know, your raw material linkages, and now you've got committed involvement. So there's those evolutionary stages of getting there. Okay, so this is what it kind of looks like. This is the different types of businesses as you're, you know, increasing your commitment and your ownership, and then as you're increasing your risk. All right, so what you're doing is, you know, by the time you wholly own a subsidiary, well then, you know, your profit potential is higher, your control is greater, but your risk is higher. Okay, so those are the kind of things. So we'd start with exporting, and then, you know, if you go a little further, you can get into licensing, and then franchising, and then get into these strategic alliances, you know, where you know, it might be non-equity or equity based, and then you get into joint ventures where you're looking at getting in with a local partner and starting a joint venture, and then, you know, looking at a wholly owned subsidiary where you decide, hey, we're going alone, we're going to do this, and there's ways of doing that as well, and I'll talk about that a little later, right? So that's, you know, that's the trajectory, and you should understand, you know, these different components in that trajectory. All right, so here's you know, there's no question on this in the test or whatever, but I wanted you to be aware of, there's four main accesses here, you know, where you start with the domestic business, and then from a perspective of, you know, dealing, you know, with it, you know, going global, you know, where you start is you start with, you know, a territory that's quite similar. So again, in Canada, I'm making gadget A, and I'm thinking, you know what, I could do this in the U.S. It's just across the border. You know, we have integrated supply chains. We understand the culture. You know, we share a lot of the you know, the business values and everything else. So we could do that. So we go to the U.S. All right, and then that works out. So the next stage would be, okay, well, maybe let's stick with English speaking, but now we can maybe operate in Australia, which is a little bit different from the US. It's moderately similar, so that we can do that, and we establish capabilities and our core competencies start growing. And then we say, okay, we're ready to really, we want to go full global. Maybe it's time to do something in the stand countries like Afghanistan or whatever, or in Russia. And that's very dissimilar. So that's how you start. You start with the domestic, and then you can go out in terms of, where you're going to go. The next one is that what are you going to use to go there? So you take a look at, you're starting with the domestic business, and you may have other firms to handle the external contracts. Or, I talked about having an agent in your own country that understands, the international market that you want to penetrate. And then you work with that agent. And then what happened then is that you'd start finding partners and agents as you go along. And then as you get confidence in that country or countries that you're in, you can get the sense that, hey, we're ready. We know how the government works. We know what the risks are. We know what all the things that we have to agree with to make this business go. So let's do it ourselves. And then you get into this foreign direct investment. All right. So that's the level of independence as you go out. The next one is what kind of functions do you use? So we said, well, the limited foreign functions, you usually start with exports, and then you might get into production, and then you'll get into the full mode of operation and operating as a 100% owned subsidiary, where it's working, say in Germany, that it's completely looking after the German market and beyond, and inside of the European Union or whatever. And then on the last one, it's like, how many countries are you going to go into? Some just go into one country and they're happy. But once they get used to working in one country, they'll do several, and then they'll do many, so that they're fully gone global. By the time that they have an array of countries that they're going to work in. So those are the patterns of internalization or internationalization, and on those four axes, to be able to understand how you walk before you run, and then you fly. Right, and you satisfy those customers wholly on the outsides of these circles. Okay, so how are markets different across borders, and what are the implications? Well, there's cultural distance. So we know that Hofstadter is probably a good place to start. He's a guru in cultures. And there's a matrix that you go through and find out about. But look at the people in North America. They're more of individuals. The more of their relationships are transactional, and when they're trying to deal with organizations, on the eastern side of the globe, well, those organizations are more community driven, driven by elders, driven by sort of established ways of doing business, and that's a big cultural difference to be able to go. They're more interested in the the success of the overall community rather than the individual. So that you got to see where you are in terms of the cultural difference with the bodies that you're dealing with. Administrative and political distance. Well, we're in North America. It's fairly democratic, and you have a lot more freedom to be able to make decisions, and not with the government. And now, if you're dealing with an organization in one of the autocratic type countries, well, that's a big, wide distance that you have to understand in terms of how do you do business, how do you protect yourself, and how do you create these win-win situations with understanding and respecting the different aspects of cultures and everything else. Geographic distance, I think that's quite obvious. The thing is that the longer the distance, the less marketing you can do. And then the economic distance, well, in some countries, organizations have freer or more economic freedom to make their own decisions versus in a central command type of government. Those organizations have not as good or not as much economic freedom to do what they need. So how do you deal with that? So you need to understand all those implications. And again, there's three types of global strategies. There's the overall global strategy, the multi-domestic strategy, and the transnational strategy. And those come with the definitions that we need to cover. Okay, I'm just looking at time here. So I think we're okay. We're getting close. So let's just talk about Porter's diamond model of competitive advantage. So you're familiar with this five forces model. So this now is basically on an international basis. When you're talking about rivalry, you're talking about rivalry in a particular international target area. And you're talking about the structure of the industry, say in that country, and again, you're looking at the related and supporting industries. So if I wanted to develop a high precision mechanical product, I'd likely go to Germany because Germany has a lot of highly sophisticated manufacturing capability. They've got a lot of supporting suppliers and manufacturers that can create parts. So that's that's a big piece to look at to make sure that you've got the support capabilities to be able to manage your offering and have overall competitive advantage when you're doing that. And then factor conditions, and factor conditions could be just sourcing natural resources or what the human resources are in terms of training and development. Do you have the right individuals that have the skills that you need to work in that country, to have your organization thrive in that country? Different types of capital resources and the level of technology that you can get support from. So this is all the key areas of what this is all about. Here's some descriptions around that, but here's the model itself, and you can see firm strategy and structural rivalry, demand conditions. We're talking about the customer. Factor conditions. These are the different capabilities and core competencies that you can draw from, and so that you should understand this. If you're going to get into this arena, this is another model that you can use to really characterize and do a study on where you need to go to really support your planning effort. This next one is this is sort of a pretty standard marketing 2x2 matrix, where you can go from an existing market to a new market, and you can go from an existing product or existing, so an existing product to a new product. And then when you take a look at you can be right out here with with new and you can see that the risk could be higher, but you could pick a particular strategy based on what you do. And we all know that the best thing in marketing is to just sell more to your existing customers. That's the most effective way of improving your products. And then if you're just into a growth strategy, there you're taking a lot more risks in terms of how you're going to do this in terms of new markets and new products and going from there. Okay, so what are the common entry modes? Exporting, licensing, strategic alliances, greenfield investments, mergers and acquisitions. So I think we're going to talk about that a little bit. Direct exporting, again, is that you're making a particular offering in your own country, and then you're selling it abroad. All right, so that's how to get into the global markets. The indirect exporting, I talked about where you can, sell to an agent, and either an agent in your own country that will channel into that international target market, or actually find an agent right in that foreign market, and then sell to them. Joint venture, so that maybe a partner, a local partner, that you could come together and create an organization in that foreign country. And then now you have a partner that has an established clientele. It has established relationships with the regulators and the government, understands the market footprint. So it gives you a lot of advantages to be able to get something going fast and gain some competitive advantage. And then strategic alliances. And strategic alliances, a lot of times they're complementary organizations. So I can think of one where you might have a organization that has operational or operational excellence, and they can produce things very effectively. And then you may have another one that's organization that is really innovative in product design and whatever. And then you may have another organization that really understands marketing and has channels. So think about getting those three components together, how formidable that could be in a foreign country, to have all those core competencies and skills to be able to sustain competitive advantage. So that's one form of alliance. Another form of alliance is that you may have these large projects, and these large projects have to be driven properly from a control point of view. So you may have a lead partner that owns an equity portion in each other of the other partners. And what that gives them is control over the project to make clear strategic directions and maintain a strategy, rather than if all these alliance partners are equal, they may have different agendas, right? And that's what they call a capital partnership, where one company owns a part of the equity and all the others in that particular project. All right, and then absolute direct foreign investment. So you can just go out and you purchase a company in that particular country, and that's direct foreign investment, and there's different ways of doing that, right? So again, I take you back to this global strategy, what we just talked about. Kind of go through the multinational aspects of what that is to understand, how they do things. Here's just an example of where Apple is. It's an international strategy. Why? Because there's fairly low pressure for cost reductions, because they command that market, and they work with one main manufacturer for their products, and they're also low pressure for local responsiveness, because it's such their products are so attractive, that the customer adjusts to the standard because of the capabilities and the value it brings to the customer. So that's why Apple is more, in terms of providing an international strategy. They can afford to do that. Okay. I talked about this thing: think global, act local. But again, thinking globally and act locally urges people to consider the health and the entire planet, and to take action in their own communities and cities. So it really brings in triple bottom line as well. So think of that piece. Just want to make this again important. As you go through here. Not going to talk about this, but here's where a description of the range of global approaches come in to play. So this is a key area of understanding these 5 different areas, in particular importing and exporting. What's that all about? Well, importing is buying from a foreign provider and then selling it in your own country, whereas exporting is you're making it in your own country and you're selling it abroad. Those kind of things. So be mindful of how to go global. So exporting, you're making products at home, you're selling abroad. Importing, you're acquiring products, like I said, and selling them at home. Licensing, a manufacturer, say, gives another organization the right to use its brand name, its technology, or its product specifications. And then franchising, there's a service organization gives the entity the right to sell a product using the specific business methods and practices that are standardized. All right, so know that this is just a help, to kind of see what the advantages and disadvantages of each types of international businesses, what they involve in. But again, understanding, the entities and understanding what they're all about. So a global corporation, it's an international company that centralizes management and other decisions in their home country. All right, and that's where Apple is, right? It's an international company. World market is treated as an integrated whole and focused on control and efficiency. Now, a transnational organization, that's an international company in which it has artificial geographical barriers. They're not, they don't have a head office in some home country. They're in every country that they need to be, where they can extract all the synergies to provide, this excellent, sustainable, competitive advantage value chain. And what are they doing? They're focusing on efficiency and effectiveness. And some transnational organizations are so large, their balance sheets are larger than some developing countries. Okay, so I come back to, owning, the equity arrangement in terms of maybe in a joint venture, or having a subsidiary, or even in an alliance. So again, if the company owns 100% of company B, well, that's a wholly owned subsidiary. But in some cases, a company may decide to just own 75%, and this gives them still controlling interest in what's going on, and it's a partly owned subsidiary. And then here, a company, the parent company will own 25% in an equity investment. And what that means is they still want their foot in that country because maybe they can access or source, key technology, or source key raw materials. But it allows them, with that other 75% that they would have invested in, to invest in other countries, so they can really build their overall strategy around synergy and the value chain. So there's different strategic reasons for having a 100% owned subsidiary versus a 25% stake in an investment, and that's based on your global strategy on where you want to take that organization and how fast you want to go, and how pervasive that you want to be on a global scale to be able to increase your sustainable competitive advantage. Okay, so here's a little more on on a foreign subsidiary. It's a company that operates in one country. So go through that definition, and then again, now you can see where I'm taking you into understanding these definitions. You can see that they're highlighted. So really read into what is a multinational corporation. Well, it's centralized management structure organization. What is a transnational corporation? They spread out their operations in many countries, sustain high levels of local responsiveness, and then the types of global organizations. So, the Global Business Alliance and those pieces. Here's where, you can get into regional trade alliances. And here's a really good sort of a rule of thumb, is that as distance increases between trading partners, trade drops. And that's why sometimes companies will decide to stay in a regional trade alliance rather than go fully global. And in some cases, they look at it as a stepping stone to get to, to get into a global alliance. In other cases, they just do it because it makes sense, and there's more commonalities in a regional trade alliance, and less worry and less risk to worry about. Okay, not going to cover these pieces. These are just overview slides that I thought would have been helpful. All right, but now just talking about foreign availability. So in earlier decades, industrial countries mainly participated in world trade due to wage-based competition. And today, it's based on technology-based competition. So here's the difference: is that before they used to go out, and in some cases even exploit, low-cost labor in foreign areas and manufacture offshore. Basically, is what they're doing to be able to get the cost down and improve their profitability. But with technology, like just talk about 3D printing. So somebody now in downtown New York and with a 3D printer can produce an item that that formerly was produced in 3,000 miles away, with low cost labor, but now they don't have to worry about the labor component because they have the technology. So that's what's changing foreign availability right now. So high technology products are available worldwide from many sources, and so that's changing the game. But you need to understand political risk and the risk of loss, when investing in a given country caused by changes in the country's political structure. So here's an example: is that there was I can't remember the name of the company, but it was a car manufacturer, and they decided that they were going to locate their car manufacturing in Venezuela. And in Venezuela, they were worried about the government nationalizing industries. So what did they do? Is that they built the car manufacturing company, but they excluded one part of the manufacturing to still have it done in their country. And so why? It's because, say the government nationalized it, they wouldn't be able to produce cars because of that missing component. So they kind of leveraged their safety or mitigated their risk in terms of what's going on. But there's ownership risk, there's operating risk, there's transfer risk, there's all these things that you need to worry about. So this is basically some background to be able to go through to be able to understand what's going on. And then understanding the difference between the different types of laws. Like there's a difference between civil law and common law. And civil law was framed in France. Common law was started in England. And oh, by the way, there's two sets of laws in Canada. In Quebec, it's civil law. And because, Quebec was originally created or was a colony of France. And then in the rest of the provinces, it's common law. So you got to understand that, because, you're going to get into legal requirements in different parts of the countries. So here's just a map to show you, so maybe that, if you're in a common law country, well, maybe your first foray into international would be, go to a target country that has common law, and then understand where there's mixed law, where there's Muslim law, that you need to understand that. And if you take a look at the context of legality, so when you look at an authoritarian type of country, you're really dealing with the rule of man, and what that means is it's just a little more volatile. So if the autocrat decides that they want to change the law, they just change the law. Whereas if you're in a country that's basically around the rule of law, there's a lot more conservation around the or sustainability of that regime kind of thing of the rule of law to be able to do business in. So understand that piece, and then understand the different types of freedoms, and in some countries there's very little economic freedom because the country is run by a central government, and likely a little less political freedom, and then in some cases a little less religious freedom. So those are the things that you need to consider around that. You go through a pestle and go through these key areas of going through to that, and then we're going to get into ethics and corporate social responsibility. So in today's situation, here's the things that you need to kind of be aware of: the globalization, ethical responsibility, which is becoming more and more important. And the thing is, if you take a look at in different parts of the world, there's things that go on that may not be legal in the home country that you're working from, or they may not, ethical responsibility or ethical approach is different, based on the different cultures. So you need to understand that. And in today's world, again, if you're going to be looking at the triple bottom line, social responsibility, is very important. Sustainability is very important. And the age of technology, and if you take a look at where AI is going and robotics, that's going to really turn the economies on its ear in the next generation. So you need to worry about those pieces. All right. So again, planning typically leads to higher profits among many other positive outcomes. So understand that, and you can see where, these areas, come into play in terms of, planning for profit. Productivity brings you profit. Managing social impact and social responsibilities, that's the people and planet side. So that's how this all sort of comes together. But here's what I've learned is that, a lot of the ethical and social responsibilities of an organization can be consistently managed if you train and develop your employees and engage them to regard, these issues in a positive way. So how do you deal with discrimination and harassment? Workplace health and safety could actually get you into a legal situation. How do you handle whistleblowing? How do you handle ethical accounting practices? Non-disclosures. How do you work, with intellectual property, technology and privacy, nepotism and favoritism, environmental responsibility. So those are some of the key areas that you need to look at when you're looking at ethical and social responsibilities of an organization. And again, understand, the views, and this is key. You see that it's all highlighted. So understand what each one of these views of ethical systems are. Depends where you live sometimes in the world. So universalism, it's a nonprofit organization, treats all of its employees who work in different countries with fairness and dignity. Egoism, entrepreneur builds a successful company. Utilitarianism, relativism, virtue ethics. So understand what these are. I'm not going to get into it. We're running out of time. But again, this slide is fully highlighted. So there's a lot to learn in here. So really understand what the utilitarian view is, and what the rights view is, and what the theory of justice view is, and the integrative social contracts is, to be able to really know what you need to do. And here's some examples, in business, where you come across these issues, and then look at look at the most common types of ethical misconducts in the workplace. Conflict of interest, look at that. Abusive behaviors, violations of health and safety, corruption, discrimination, sexual harassment. That really gives you a sense of where the priority should be in terms of looking after and mitigating those impacts. But again, I get back to training has an impact. And it's been proven that organizations that are serious about, training their people and engaging their people in understanding, the ethical components of what's important to the organization will go a long way in keeping that organization, on a good footing towards a good triple bottom line, right? Okay, so let's talk about corporate social responsibility. So it's a firm's intention beyond its legal and economic obligations to do the right things and act in ways that are good for society. So there's social obligations, where the firm engages to meet economic and legal responsibilities, but there's social responsiveness, characteristics of a business firm that emerges in social actions and respond to some popular social needs. Again, it's all around, the triple bottom line. You can see from a corporate social responsibility, if you go into a boutique coffee shop, chances are you're going to see a fair trade poster on their wall. Why? Because they're interested in having, the coffee bean producers having a good and healthy and safe, productive life and not being exploited, and those kind of things, put pressures on organizations, to do the right things from a people, planet, and profit perspective. Okay, and again, what's driving that? It's conscious consumerism, and it refers to the practice of making purchasing decisions. So the customer, the consumer has a lot more power now than it ever did. Why? Because they're more informed, and so that they can impose on ethical, environmental, and social considerations to be made, or they will take their business somewhere else. And you can even see that in the stock markets. There's a series of ethical stocks that are sold, and those ethical stocks are based on companies who really are triple bottom line driven. They're protective of the environment. They're socially conscious, and people will invest in those particular companies. And again, what's driving that? Well, the consumers are driving that by buying their shares. So what's the key elements of conscious consumerism? Ethical sourcing, environmental sustainability, social responsibility, transparency, and accountability, so that there's no fraud going on inside of the organization or whatever. So here's a key slide to really kind of really look at in terms of what you should study in this area and understand the different types of approaches based on a continuum. So on high social responsibility, you would have a very proactive approach, a strong commitment to social responsibility. So if you want a really good example in Canada of an organization that has a proactive approach, Van City Credit Union in Vancouver. They're probably one of the leaders in corporate social responsibility in Canada. And why? Is because they're just as worried about the success of the communities that they serve than they are with the profitability of the banking that's done in the credit union and the environment. They offer electric vehicle discounted loans, because of the pollution that gas-powered vehicles provide. They look at low interest loans for business providers. They look at the underprivileged in those areas and how to support them, right? And then on the other side is the obstructionist approach. They have a total disregard for social responsibility. So in some cases, they're probably violating laws that they're trying to get away with. And then there's the defensive approach, and that's, well, they're meeting the requirements of the law, and that's it. And there's a difference between meeting the requirements of the law and making moral commitments. Sometimes you could be within the law, but it's almost immoral of what you're doing, and that's the defensive approach. And then the accommodative approach that's probably fits most of the players, say in Canada, where they have a moderate commitment to social responsibility. And so understand that these different areas of approach, along this range of possibilities. Okay, so why to be socially responsible? Well, brand reputation globally in today's world is a big a part of achieving consumer confidence. And if you've got a good reputation, then people will believe you, and they know that you will respect the brand, and the brand is the promise, right? So good reputation means increased business, improved ability to obtain resources, enhanced profitability, right? So there's a lot of advantages, to be socially responsible in today's world. Here's more details around these parts of that continuum that I talked about. So it'll give you more information to understand that. I greatly encourage that you go through these pieces to understand that one slide. Again, here's a little blurb about what Van City is all about. it makes social responsibility a priority. It shows you that, how committed they are in the community. And the thing is that corporate social responsibility pays. And remember, we talked about, the customer journey, and at the end of that journey, there was, you're looking at sustaining the key advocates of the business, the champions, the missionaries. I mean, that's really what gets you to, customer lifetime value type arrangements where you're going to sustain, profits. You're going to sustain your competitiveness. It's no different now, going up this customer ladder, with corporate social responsibility. It gets you right up here in terms of having, champions and advocates for your company because they believe in you. And belief is a very strong parameter. If they believe that you're responsible, if they believe that you're doing the right things for society, the right things for the environment, they will support you. And that's key. So, understand this customer loyalty ladder. And then, I keep on going back to my old pattern. We all need to be good ancestors. And what does that mean? It's looking at future generations and how can we, as business leaders, make the right decisions, to enforce this triple bottom line approach, so that our grandchildren's grandchildren still enjoy the same benefits we enjoy on this in this world. And the thing is, by 2050, the way that we're going with consumerism and waste and everything, we're going to need 3 planets to sustain that. Well, we only have 1 planet, so sustainability is a big deal. And it's, if you can be a good ancestor, then you're going to make the right decisions. All right. And then we talk about ethical issues. So there are obligations faced by multinational enterprises, and a lot of that comes out of corporate governance. You have the right people, determining the right policies for the organization so that they're going to do the right things in terms of triple bottom line. They're going to protect intellectual property rights. They're going to eliminate corruption, right? So when an investment abroad, should firms from a developed country with stringent ethical laws be allowed to use looser local principles to their advantage? If we're going to go down that road, what are we going to do as leaders? We're going to dilute our efforts. Okay, that's all I'll tell you about that. So corporate governance is really important. And, if you want to know anything about a corporate governance breakdown, you really need to look at some of the key organizations that were a house of cards because they didn't have corporate governance. Like Enron, back in, I think it was the 90s. Enron was the darling of the stock market. It had the most growth, but they didn't have, the right governance to make it. And even the consultants and the lawyers knew what they were doing wrong, but there was so much profit to be made. And then all of a sudden, like a house of cards, they had a whistleblower and the whole thing dropped out of the market. All these Americans lost their pensions, their 401s, and it had a devastating effect. And out of that, came the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and where it imposed tremendous, regulatory type restrictions on businesses that had to report. And some of the smaller businesses really had a hard time, absorbing, the cost of complying with Sarbanes-Oxley. There was all kinds of, complications in terms of meeting all these restrictions. So it comes down to, doing the right thing, right? So here's a little bit about ethical issues. Here's a little bit about Enron that, you can read about. This is, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. It just changed everything and put a lot of restrictions and burden on smaller companies, who didn't have the capabilities to do that. And then understand that intellectual property, although the World Trade Organization is helping it, it's come a long way, but there's still violations of patents and that, and you need to enforce it, and that's where your leadership is going to come in, to be able to protect intellectual property, to be able to get there. And I think that's really all that I'm going to talk to you about. Yeah, that's it. All right, so that's it for today. And again, remind you that next week we're gonna talk about artificial intelligence. And again, be mindful of participation activities 13A and 13B. 13B is where you show me from basically screenshots on a PDF, all the surveys that you did to get your 3 bonus marks for doing all those Pearson Revel surveys. There's instructions in 13B on what qualifies and what doesn't, and then you can read through that, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I will publish this this video conference or on YouTube tomorrow, and you'll be able to access it as well. Okay, so that's it for tonight. Are there any questions?
Hi Gary, thank you for the class. I have a question, not relating to the topic, but relating to our project. What do we do if we have an inactive group member?
What you do is that you identify the people that worked on the project.
Okay.
And if there was absolute inactivity, that person will get a 0. All right. Okay. If they, if you can comment on what percentage that they completed, well, then they'll get, their mark will get prorated on based on the overall project mark.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay, if that's it, then we will we'll adjourn.